So Lama, I met you at the Lead Today, Shape Tomorrow conference in Vienna. And at first I met you because I complimented you on your cool outfit, your skirt that I loved. And then I realized, oh, like she's actually the speaker, right? And I loved the way, I think it was, I can't remember who it was, Elizabeth or someone, they introduced you. And one of the things they said right away was they said, Lama is an accomplished entrepreneur, thought leader, background in investment banking, blah, blah, blah. And they like listed all the things. But then the thing that really caught my attention was she said, and she speaks, and I think it was like 6 languages. Is it 6 or more?
Yeah, 6.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So yeah, so I'm trying to remember what they were. It was because you've lived all over the world. So English, German, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, and
No, I speak French.
French.
I do not speak Chinese.
Okay.
I speak Portuguese.
You speak Portuguese. Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you were born in Lebanon, and your first kind of like experience outside of Lebanon was in Spain, right? You went to school in Spain. And can you tell us like what kicked off that adventure? Because it seemed like that then formed a pattern for the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, correct. Born and raised in Beirut. So I decided to leave after the 2006 war in Lebanon, and I had gotten a scholarship to Spain. So I moved right out to Spain when I was about 17, 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then Spain for me was the first time I lived alone, and it happened to be just right out, not in my own country alone. But from the beginning, I never felt unsettled because my comfort zone was being unsettled. I'm pretty sure that a lot of us who are born and raised in emerging markets, especially ones that come with conflict, just like the Middle East was and is, unfortunately, still today. We're kind of like, we always grow up in an insecure environment. So when we're playing on the street with our ball, we're always aware that nobody steals our ball, how we cross the street, if there's any danger around us. So we have a lot of awareness. So we're always living unsettled. So for me, just living alone in Spain was not that huge of a deal because it was just yet another environment where I was unsettled. And that was super cool. Living in Spain was absolutely great, awesome. I got to work, I got to live, I got to build the first venture, like a small joint venture in the gastronomy space, because I lived in San Sebastian in the north of Spain, which is a huge gastronomic capital. And then after that, I got my first job and I moved out, and I started a career in investment banking that took me from China to South Korea to the Middle East to Kenya to Germany until it ended eventually. So yes, I'm not sure if this answers your question, but yeah.
Yeah, it does. And what, going from your first venture in gastronomy, what led you to investment banking?
It was essentially I had told you that I felt insecure all of my life, and I wanted to feel secure. So I started asking my professors at university what kind of career makes you a lot of money.
Yeah,
And then
good question.
and the consensus was banking. And I said, okay, cool, let's figure out what the hell banking is. So I put a list of all the banks and I started applying, and I got into investment banking just because someone told me it makes money. So that for me was my a way of building security more than anything, because I didn't go into it to buy myself the Ferraris. So I went into it to essentially support myself and my family. I'm the eldest of 3. I have a very sick father and a non-working mother. So for me, that was a way of supporting all of them rather than a luxury lifestyle or anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it serves the purpose, for sure. It served the purpose.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, and what you were saying about being out of your comfort zone, like being unsettled all the time. I looked at, there was a LinkedIn post that you posted a while back, and you said, for
Yeah.
me, resilience and adaptability are the secret ingredients to overcome hurdles, pivot effectively, and seize opportunities. And so this
Mhm.
resilience and adaptability, it seems like from looking at your CV and all the things that you've managed to accomplish, it seems like almost like your special sauce, like you thrive on that instability, and then you move on it. And what like how did you learn? Were there things that you learned maybe growing up in Beirut that taught you how to be resilient and adaptable? Is that something you learned from a coach, or like what has been your journey with that?
That's a very good question. So, um, I think the the threshold for stress and panic that I have is so high
Mhm.
that um, anything beneath it to me is essentially something that's not worth stressing out about. So in the sense that when I have to do anything at work or when something doesn't work out and we have to pivot, we lose a deal, something unfortunate occurs. Usually my first response in my brain was essentially just to panic or to be upset or whatever.
Mm.
Um, but I'm not able to panic. I know this is what is expected of me, but I don't, right? And the reason why I don't, and I figured this out through understanding myself now that I'm in my early 30s, is because, and I might have mentioned this before to you, that um, unless there's a bomb outside, I don't panic. So this is my understanding of resilience. That unless it's something that's life threatening, and I'm talking here literal life threatening, but it could be life threatening career wise or
Mm.
on a different scale, I don't panic, and this is how I am able to be resilient and adapt to different environment easily because my threshold is quite high. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And it seems like I've lived in many different countries as well. And I know that when you find yourself in a new space and a new language and a new culture, it can be quite stressful. But for me, it's something I feel like I thrive on, and I seek out
Yeah.
in a way. And would you agree with that? And when you, like, for example, when you drop yourself into a new situation where everything is new and everything's a challenge, um like, do you have to kind of motivate yourself, or are you just on autopilot? Like, I'm curious how that works for you with your background.
Immediately on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
I think I thrive in chaos. Chaos is my comfort zone. And
Yeah.
then when there's no chaos, my the way I do.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed by kind of looking at like how you engage on LinkedIn, and just also your presence at the conference when I met you, it's really clear to me that you place a lot of value in like the network, like the community. And it's obvious you have a large network as well. One of the things you said in a post recently, you said, because when you're launching OPTO, and I want to talk about OPTO as well, but you said that big ideas need a big network. And I thought, oh yeah, that's true. I never thought about that before. And I'm curious because a lot of people struggle with this idea of networking. It's like a lot of people think it feels kind of like icky, or they don't like it. And I'm curious what your approach to that is. Like, for example, when you attend a conference, what's your approach to connecting with people? How does it work in your mind, and then also like tactically as well?
So in a conference setup, I would generally speaking, I do a couple of things. The first thing is that if there's a specific person, specific profile I want to meet, I will drop them a message ahead of time and I'll try to meet them. But when it comes to general networking, I just tend to talk and form a relationship, whether it's at a superficial level or a deeper level, with whoever I'm naturally drawn to. So I do not force myself to like to build a network with people that I'm not generally or easily drawn to. Most of my networking that I've done in my life has been because I've moved a lot, and because has been that I've put myself out there a lot. So obviously I've done an executive MBA at in the biggest network of executive MBAs in the world, and that's Kellogg at Northwestern, but which also helps building my network. But I've also worked in large banks, and I've been just a social butterfly my entire life, and I think it comes to me quite naturally. The tactics, I really, generally speaking, is just finding someone I'm interested in, and also just forming true relationships most of the time, because I've found out that in 9 out of 10 times I've had something to solve, it's been because of who I know rather than what I know. Knowledge is key, absolutely, but network beats knowledge, I think. Very often when it comes to practical life situations.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that too. I think a lot of us, we like to think that it's what we know, but at the end of the day, it's as easy as asking the person next to you, hey, how have you solved this? And it's just so much easier. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you said you've been a social butterfly all your life. Would you say you've always been confident?
No. Hell no.
Tell me a story about when you weren't confident, because it's kind of hard to imagine,
Oh, oof, wow. So, I mean, I've always been the odd one out. Imagine a young Lebanese girl in northern Spain at age 18, in the heart of the Basque country, where everyone speaks Basque and Spanish, and then there's me, right? I clearly am an outlier, and then I'm an outlier in China, I'm an outlier in South Korea, I'm an outlier in most places most of the time. So it might have been a defense mechanism for me just to be social butterfly. I'm not sure. This is not something I can answer on a conscious level. On an unconscious level, it might have been some sort of defense mechanism. But I've never actually been absolutely confident in myself up until I've raised my first round of financing. Because obviously people tell you a lot of things. They tell you, oh, you're great, you're awesome, you've done this, you've done that. But then when there's a number on it, when you monetize it, when there's just a value that your analytical brain understands, then actually, yeah, maybe you're right. Okay. And this doesn't mean that my way is the right way of feeling about confidence, but this is when I started feeling confidence. Like, hey, people who don't know me, a couple of them have never seen me in person before, ever. And they've just written huge checks. And I feel this must mean that there's something out there that is worth investing in. And this was the first time I've ever felt confident. And I think it's half the battle most of the time. But before that, I would say huge imposter syndrome. I think I'm not the only one. Women really suffer from that, and you probably know it better than I do, having worked with a lot of women before. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh yeah, no, imposter syndrome is the number one thing that people struggle with. And one of the biggest problems is that everybody thinks it's just them. Like, oh, it's just me that has imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But really, it's like, no, it's actually all of us, and we all struggle with the same thing. And even men too. I work with a lot of men who struggle with that. Yeah, it's such a strange infliction that we all suffer from. Yeah. Well, one of the things, again, reflecting on your LinkedIn posts and your presence online, I really love the way you do posts, and I'm actually going to start copying your style, because I'm like, wow, it's really natural, and it just feels like you're having a conversation, and it doesn't feel like you have an agenda. You're just like posing something like, hey, have you noticed this? Or, what are you thinking about this? And like, here are some things that I've noticed. And then you always pose a question at the end. And I really love that, because it seems very genuine and authentic. And like, you actually do want to have this conversation. And that, of course, comes off as confident because it's relaxed. So yeah, it's really wonderful. But it's strange with the whole imposter syndrome thing, because it also, there is a certain amount of, what would you call it? Like relief, I guess, when you hear that someone as accomplished as yourself struggled with the same thing, because again, it's the story that's in our own mind, like, oh, I'm the weird one. I'm the one that's, having all the problems, but it's not true. Yeah.
Yeah. And also most of us grow up with a lot of, with a lack of role models, right? Especially women, we grew up with lack of role models, like in the entrepreneurship realm, and the realm of STEM, and the realm of leadership across the board, right? So it's not unusual for us to feel like we're not represented and we're odd wherever we are, right? Like in the startup scenery, women get less than 2% of the global funding for startups, right? Which is quite ridiculous if you come to think about it, right? So obviously we grew up without knowing that we're supposed to, or we belong in a certain group, right? And I completely understand. I wouldn't, if I could go back to myself 5 years ago, and I would try to tell myself, hey, don't worry, you'll get there, I would still feel like, I don't belong. I think it's just the process everyone has to go through, and until you have that moment, the screw it moment kind of thing. And which I think many women have as well, luckily. Did you ever feel imposter syndrome ever?
Oh God, every day. Yeah. And I've had one of those screw it moments very recently, and it's interesting. It feels very liberating. Like there's this moment of coming up for air, like you've been in the swimming pool for a long time, and then you break through and you're like, it feels like that. I don't know if you've read the book, oh my God, what is it called? It's about wild women. I can't remember.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm reading this book right now, and it's about like the wild spirit of women, and it's something that book is speaking to, is similar to what we're speaking to now. It's this bucket moment where we're able to reconnect with our wild essence, and that's when we become powerful, because we break free from these cultural stories that we inherited. Yeah.
I truly admire, like the older I get in life and the more I see in the world, I realize that the women way of doing things, right, of doing business, of doing politics and so on, must be brought up a bit more. And I'm talking about the woman way rather than the woman herself, right? I was watching a documentary a few days ago, a beautiful documentary about the Israel and Palestine situation. And it was a documentary from the 50s mostly in the 40s and the 50s, and it was about when men were engaged in war in the region. Women started getting together, Israeli and Palestinian women, and they started getting together and they started talking. And then they were very close to signing the closest thing to a peace treaty between the two countries. And then men came back from war and like, go back to the kitchen, right? And go back to the kitchen, we're back here, right? And the reason why I'm bringing up this story is because obviously I truly believe in that women need to be empowered, and not because it's we're talking about diversity and inclusion. I think because the women way of doing things, de-escalating situations most of the time, and just being generally caring and empathetic must prevail in leadership, whether it's in businesses or in politics. And obviously someone will come and tell me, oh, look at, I don't know, Margaret Thatcher, she was a warmonger. Yes, but she was a woman in a man's world. She was playing the man game. She was effectively, she had male behavior, right? So I'm talking about that's why I'm a fan of the way women do business, not because they're women, it's because of the female way of looking at things. And that's what I understand with female empowerment here. I think it's important for our future, for our livelihoods, for for peace treaties, for just generally speaking around the world. And I realize this now that I'm in my early 30s and I've gone through a lot of years of listening of, hey, we need to empower women, we need to empower women, and now I get it. I kind of get why. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, women's way of their relationality. We're masters of relationships, really. And I think we can both agree that great business is built on trusting relationships, and peace is built on trusting relationships. And so, yeah, it makes sense that if women were in more positions of leadership and power, that there would be less war and less misunderstandings at the end of the day. Yeah.
And it takes about 30% of presence in any minority to make an actual difference. So it's not only female presence, it's also female presence at a level and a percentage where there is a voice heard rather than just a few women here and there, right?
Where is that statistic from? 30%, you said?
Yeah, I'll send you the
okay.
I'll send you the study.
So I wanna talk about OPTO really quickly before you have to go.
I have some time, so don't worry. I've pushed my call when Zoom dropped, so all good.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
All good. Yeah.
So the statistic you shared about the disparity in funding female-led startups, and then of course that downward trend in influencing the funding of female-led startups as a whole, right? So not just women in VC roles, but women running companies getting less funding. Did you, when you were raising for OPTO, were you aware of more scrutiny because you were a woman? I know that you were raising with your co-founder, Sebastian, I believe is his name.
Correct.
But did you notice that? Like what was your experience when you were raising?
So I would say most VCs are now aware that they need to invest in diversity. So there was a lot of positive feedback that I was given, and it was welcome. The fact that I was a woman was welcome. But I think I also did not get a lot of scrutiny because I'm not a freshman, right? I came with about 10 years of experience and I had some accomplishment. And I think VCs tend to want to see resilience and startup and founders that have accomplished something before, right? So that for me was, I did not suffer there, but I am aware of so many women who have. Women who have been asked questions that should not have been asked, right? And again, so I raised out of Germany because we've incorporated in Germany, and this is not, I did not feel any discrimination, at least, openly, for that. But I can speak for other female founders, they have. Right. And it boils down to, and I still get triggered every time someone calls me a female founder. I'm like, why is it female founder? Like, it's just a founder, move on, stop making a deal out of it. And then I started attending conferences, and every time a female founder was introduced on stage, she was introduced by another woman in VC as a female founder. So also it's a bias that women have against women as well. And in all my startup experience in fundraising, the only time I felt discriminated against as a woman was by another woman, actually. I'm not going to share the experience, but it was by a female partner who felt, who did not particularly, like me for one reason or another, perhaps on a personal level, I'm not sure, but I did feel discrimination once only by a female partner, but aside from this, it was a pretty welcoming environment for me.
Yeah, for sure. And because we know that this does exist, and I mean, what are your thoughts about how to address it? Like you gave a really clear example there of, why do we even have to use that phrasing, female, right? So that's one thing we could change. What are some other things that like from your perspective, if we just did this, it would decrease this inherent bias that's going on?
Just like many initiatives that we have to get done, having it's important to have government-led initiatives on an EU scale, on a general scale, right? So look at, for example, sustainability startups, right? Sustainability startups are taking off partially because they're regulatorily driven, right? Because there's an entity in the government that tells you they need to ensure that our future is green, right? And I think the same has to go for investing in women. I think governments should encourage it, should incentivize it in private capital. That's number one. Number two, it's important to bring out women who have done cool things and have built successful startup and telling their stories. Because this way we're not only making a role model for the younger aspiring entrepreneurs, but also we're putting out there a role model for VCs and investment to look at. And number three, I think we should, what I said earlier, we should stop calling female founders just, female founders. They're just founders. They're like anyone else, and they're awesome. And most of the time, it's actually not most of the time, 9 out of 10 times, and I'll also send you the study, that they tend to generate significantly more ROI than male-driven startups. They tend to employ more people than male-driven startups, and they have a real impact on the economy. In most countries around the world, especially in emerging markets, women tend to found businesses out of necessity rather than out of opportunity, right? And that's according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. So when investors tend to assess businesses that come out of necessity, they assess them as potential SMEs. And when they tend to assess businesses that come out of opportunity, they assess them similarly to any large corporate around the world in terms of impact. So they tend to invest more in businesses that come out of opportunity. So it's also important to give some visibility to businesses in emerging markets that also come out of necessity. And I think people like Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel laureate, who's worked very, very hard on microfinancing and so on, are so essential in our work, because not everything has to be financing rounds of 12 and 15 and 100 million. There are other cool things to do for a female, I keep calling them female entrepreneurs just to make the point, but for founders who happen to be women. And they don't have to be done on a super large scale. They can be done on a microfinance scale. And obviously curious to hear your opinion here on what you think, but I truly believe
I have a friend who he works with a lot of African small businesses, and it's mostly things like, honey producers and shea butter producers. And I, for the Female Founders Group out of Vienna, I did a workshop for the Lead F Africa batch of entrepreneurs that they brought in, all women from Africa. And so I asked my friend, Joe, I was like, hey, Joe, can I talk to you about women entrepreneurs in Africa? Because I know nothing about this and I want to have a good sense before I teach this class. And so I asked him, I said, yeah, what do you think? Essentially, like, just share with me. And he's like, women entrepreneurs in Africa are amazing. And he just goes off. He's like, they're solving problems. They're taking care of their communities. They're like diagnosing the problems that are existing at the lowest rung, that those problems then have these knock-on effects that create more problems. So the women are really great at seeing what's causing all the other problems, and then they solve the root problem. And so speaking to what you're saying, it's about this relationality, and it's this community-driven motivation to solve these problems that actually help people's lives, not about like, oh, here's this opportunity to make a lot of cash. I mean, sure, that happens too, but I think more often than not, women are motivated by different things. So I would agree.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
I'm curious, before I let you go, I want to know, who are your role models? Maybe like when you were growing up, maybe now, who are some people that have inspired you?
I think I would highlight one person in particular. So back in my banking days, so I'll start by saying that I've never had a reachable role model that I clearly identified.
Mhm.
Maybe because I didn't understand what I want, or maybe because that person was not reachable to me. But there was one person that made a huge impact on me, and that's my mentor. So her name is Suad Benkrida, and I'll send you her LinkedIn.
Thank
So
you.
Suad is very interesting because she came in, so she was the head of financial markets at Standard Chartered Bank when I was there. And what really struck me about her, and I fell in love immediately with her when I met her, was that she was very successful at getting things done, achieving amazing results, and yet she was unwavering in her ethics. Like
Mhm.
she would always 100% do the right thing,
Mhm.
have integrity, and fight for the right thing. And it was, I consider her as a role model. I was watching her from afar. I'm like, how? How does someone not get dirty and get corrupted and still run a financial market vertical for one of the biggest banks in the world?
Yeah.
And that struck me. She's a mother of two, and she was doing it all, and she was doing it amazingly while not being corrupted. And I approached her, and we started a mentorship relationship, and then obviously we became friends, and I absolutely adore her. And she keeps on growing, and she's now a role, so she took a board role at let's say bank in Germany, huge bank. And she's still the same person, and she still does awesome things, and she still fights for the right thing. And I consider her role model again because she gets things done professionally. She achieves amazing results, and yet she's has so much integrity, and she's never not stood, on the right side of things. And yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know many other people who do that, and because they tend to tell you that power corrupts, and you get to a certain level
Mhm.
when you're making big, or you're moving a lot of money around, and I have a role model that says not. So yeah, I think that's the one person I'd like to highlight, and she's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and how did you meet her? How did you find her? Because mentorship is something that I think, I mean, I know personally when I hear that someone has a mentor, I always think, oh yeah, that would be good. But for some reason, I never get around to identifying someone and having that relationship. So I'm curious how you met her.
So she worked at the bank where I was, so she was within physical reach.
Yeah.
But I just went on and approached her in the lobby, and I said hi. uh, and we immediately connected because we both have like super curly hair, and we were both always told to tone it down. Tone it
Right.
down. It's like, oh, you have curly hair, I have curly hair, let's be friends, kind of thing. But I'm also like, I approach people easily. I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
shameless that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I reach out to anyone on LinkedIn. I'll do anything like that.
Yeah.
So now, so and there's lots of people I also wanted to create this sort of relationship with, and I just reach out to them. Hey, what's up? Keen to have, like, I'm that person. I'm looking for this thing. Want to have chat? Yes, no. And yeah, it's fine. It's super hard to find a mentor. I agree. I I personally just reach out to them, or see if there's someone who can introduce me to them.
Mhm.
Um, but do you feel like there's like a kind of lack of access and real mentorship?
Um, I don't know. I don't think I can answer that question. Um, One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is I mean, our society has changed so much since COVID. And so we generally don't have this space that we can go to now, like the office, right? I think that
Mm,
that whole concept has been put in the Vitamix or whatever, and it's just like, well, what is this? I mean, I'm working from my friend's house today. I go to this co-working space. Sometimes I meet people, sometimes I don't. It feels like personally for me, the problem I'm trying to solve the most right now, because again, this idea of network and having colleagues around to help you solve problems and to work together as a group to solve problems is so important. But I think we're struggling as a society with that right now. Like, well, what is the space where we can gather? And I don't really know where this is going, because sure, there are a lot of great things about working remotely. I mean, you're in Dubai and I'm in Mexico City, and we're having a conversation right now, and that's fantastic. But yeah, how do we meet these people who can help us grow and who we can help in whatever way we can? I think that's a really big question that's important to answer. But I don't have an answer for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and cold outreaches are not wonderful, right? Yeah, that's fair. That's a very good point. I wonder, do you think that these platforms like Chief, are you familiar with Chief?
I've heard of Chief, yeah.
Yeah, or similar platforms, doesn't have to be for executives, it could be something else. Do you think these kind of networks are helpful?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make a connection in my mind. I live in Lisbon, and I joined a group called Lisbon Founders Club. And
Mm-hmm.
it's I would say it's probably 70 founders. And I got invited by someone I met at a bar, and they've turned out to be this incredible network of problem solvers, really interesting people doing cool things. And it's been so inspiring for me to be in their presence. And we started a mastermind, and now I'm in the mastermind, and that's been a game changer for me. But yet again, it's still mostly remote. We meet on Zoom, and yeah, again, Zoom is great, but at the end of the day, you're standing in a room by yourself, like it's for me and my nature, wanting to be with people and getting energy from people, it's been challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally feel you. I felt you were absolutely extroverted when I met you at the conference in Vienna. You were like moving around. You had so much energy. You had a great smile on your face,
Oh,
and
thanks.
showed that
Yeah.
you enjoyed
Yeah.
people quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you
Awesome.
one more question before I
Yes.
let you go. So, we're talking about you said being shameless when you approach people, and just, asking for things that you need. And I'm curious, when you think about what it means to communicate with confidence, for example, like be a confident communicator, like how would you describe that? If someone says, oh, I like, she's so confident in the way she communicates, like what would you say to that?
Um, you've probably noticed that even on stage, I tend to make jokes and just gesture and just be super relaxed. And I think communication with confidence is essentially being who you are with one notch of polishing it a little bit so that the message comes across better. But so picking and choosing words that are appropriate, but at the same time just being your authentic self, because you can't really fake it for too long unless unless you want to be trained to be a politician or a public or a C-level at a publicly listed company, something like that. That's a completely different ball game. But if you're an entrepreneur, just an average person who wants to just communicate and be yourself, I think the best way to do that is to just try to polish whoever you are as a human being, and just project that as much as possible. In the beginning of my public facing conversations, I used to be quite reserved. I used to just be whatever was expected of me. And then at some point I had the other, fuck it moment. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna joke on stage. I'm gonna say what I have in mind. I'm just gonna be just unapologetically me and then see what happens. And I think people react to it better because I tend to, when someone asks me about something, and even if it's an uncomfortable truth, and even if it's in front of like hundreds of people, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna go out and say, hey, this is what it is, and I'm gonna probably try to make a joke about it or sarcastically make a point and move on. And I think you've probably noticed this about me when you saw me in Vienna, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you had an ease about you that, you know, when you said you can't be someone you're not for too long, because it causes stress. It's stressful to try to be someone else. And that was what I noticed about you, is that there's an ease there because you're not trying to be someone else. You're just being yourself. And like this warmth and genuine authenticity is really approachable. So that's, yeah, it's great. And of course, there's this, the paradox of why is it so hard to just be ourselves? Why is it so hard? Like, what are we afraid of? Yeah, that authenticity piece, just be authentic. It's challenging. It can be.
I think inherently we all tend to judge each other and others, right? And because we do that, we expect to be judged. So we're just projecting, and everyone is a mirror of us, right? And when I reached a point where I stopped labeling a person good or bad, effective or non-effective, and stop, putting them in boxes and labeling them. I started seeing all the nuances in between, and then I started being myself, absolutely, just unapologetically, just being my sarcastic, very chilled self. And any of my friends will tell you that I'm quite relaxed. I always make points using satire, because I think satire delivers messages quite well. And I think it's just removing this judgment element. Stop, don't judge others. Eventually you'll stop judging yourself, and then you'll be whoever you are. And I know it sounds super cliche and it sounds easy to do. It took me quite a while, but I'm there, and it feels very comfortable, to be honest. Yeah, absolutely. And I enjoyed, obviously I enjoy talking talking about anything and everything, because I'll always voice my truth, and I won't change my truth depending on who I talk to. Yeah, no matter whether we're having an interesting conversation or an intellectual conversation, or we're just shit talking, because sometimes you're just like, what, let's talk shit. Let's talk nothing about nothing. But yeah. So would you say that you're a communicator as well, who is always kind of herself?
I think probably 80% of the time I'm myself, but then I get nervous, or I label and I say, oh, well, these people are this level and maybe I'm this level, and I'm telling stories about what may or may not be true, but then I act in response to those stories, and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting.
You don't project it, by the way. You do not project it.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, it's one of the things when I work with women, I have this group coaching group, and I always tell stories about how I'm, not confident or whatever, or like stories in my past of when I struggled with that, and they're just like, "What? I can't believe that." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's true," So I'm glad it doesn't show, and I just find it really healing and helpful, and a great reminder to have these conversations of like, yeah, sometimes I struggle with that, and always coming back to the point of like being yourself is really the only answer, because everybody else is taken, so
yeah. Also, like, obviously it's a struggle, but I guess you have to imagine Sisyphus as a happy man, right?
yes. Right. Oh, I love that. Great.
I think, well, who was it? It was Albert Camus who said it. I think it was Albert Camus, the philosopher, who said that you have to imagine Sisyphus as a happy man, that even though he was cursed with having to roll the gigantic rock uphill all his life, you just have to imagine that he was happy doing it because that was his life purpose, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So maybe that's our life purpose, I
yeah,
guess.
100% agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice. Such a wonderful conversation, Lama. Thank you so much for your
of
time.
course,
Uh,
happy to.
yeah, I'll follow up with the recording and of course the article that I post, and of course feel free to use it in any way that you want. And yeah, let's stay in touch. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely, anytime. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Have a great time in Mexico.
Yeah, thank you. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.